Hey, how's it going, everyone? Welcome back to Freddy or Not, where my name is Freddy and I am ready to dive into today's topic, which is villains. More specifically, Ben 10 villains, and what happened to them after the show. You see, this year is the 20th anniversary of the episode Ben 10,000. So now that we are finally in the future, I thought it is time for us to check in on the villains. So be sure to like and subscribe, because in this one, we're diving into the fate of every single villain in Ben 10. Before we start, let's talk about the future in Ben 10. As any true Ben 10 fan knows, every time travel adventure changes the future, with the original future from Ben 10,000 being replaced with Ultimate Ben, and Ultimate Ben being replaced with Ben 10K. Yet in spite of the multiple time travel adventures with Ben 10K and Omniverse, it seems that the timeline was unaffected because the Time War was a time loop, and that Ben 10K is still the canon future. Now, in spite of these two episodes no longer happening in the timeline, according to a writer's statement, the future of Ben 10K is virtually identical to the future presented in those two episodes, with only minor details being different, like Ben becoming super serious when he was 20 instead of when he was 15. Because of this, I will be taking information from those two episodes into account when talking about the fates of certain villains. And just so you know, I will be talking about every villain's fate in order of appearance. So we'll start with villains introduced in Season 1 of the original series and work our way up to the final season of Omniverse. With that established, let me save some time right off the bat and tell you that every robot villain was destroyed, alright? This includes the Vilgax drones, the robot Max fought for Dona, and even Sam, the sentient AI that controlled the weather. Still crazy that they built that for the Weather Channel, by the way. Starting off with the classic OG Ben 10 villain, we have Dr. Animo. Now, in the future, Animo is going to lose his body while trying to recreate the original Kevin 11 mutation. He later attaches his decapitated head to a white gorilla body, and then he helped Vilgax regenerate and attack Ben in the episode Ben 10,000, before time traveling back to help his past self. Finally, in the episode End of an Era, we see the moment he escaped into the past, as well as when Spanner brought him back to the future to be locked up. During the events of the episode, he tries to escape but is defeated by Max during his retirement party, making Animo the last villain Max arrested. Also, due to Derek G. Wyatt insisting that the events of Ben 10,000 and Ken 10 happened, albeit with slight differences, that means that Animo will get his cranium back at some point before losing it once again. Also, fun fact, Animo has his first appearance in the second episode and his last appearance in the second to last episode. So that's pretty neat. The Krakken. After getting its kids back, it makes two appearances in Omniverse. One where she's being used as guard dog by Captain Cork, and another where she's tamed by the Vreedles and sent to attack Ben, before being released back into the water by Mod Vreedle. As for Jonah Melville, who debuted in the same episode, in the end, he and his gang were arrested and never seen again, unless you count a comic appearance where he's a poacher and is quickly defeated. And if you believe the Power Splash Flash game, in which he tries to kidnap Gwen and Stinkfly decimates him. But yeah. The Limax. Although only debuting in one episode, the Limax were foreshadowed to return. They actually do so off-screen in the Limax Wars of 2017. It is during this war that Grandpa Max loses his arm. And if you forgot, the Limax likes eating elderly people. And Grandpa Max lost an arm in this war. Did they eat him? Episode 5. This episode introduces classic villains Zs'skayr as well as Tetrax. Now, Tetrax gets banished to the Shadow Realm. Not literally, I shouldn't joke about that since that's a real place in Ben 10. But my point is, Tetrax does not appear at all in Omniverse. His alternate universe counterpart does, though. That being said, his fate actually ties in with 666. As revealed in pop-up trivia, Tetrax and 666's rivalry will continue well into the future, until it's settled in one final showdown. As for who won this showdown, we have no idea. Reminds me a lot of Dragon Ball Online, where Goku and Vegeta go off into space to have one last battle against each other, and are never heard from again. Oh yeah, Kraab. I legitimately almost forgot about him. He's one of the bounty hunters hunting down the Tekadon Cube, before getting arrested by Argent's Tekadon robots and banned from Undertown. I don't know if he was arrested or what, but at the very least, he won't be back in Undertown. Kind of a moot punishment since this was his only appearance in Omniverse and thus his only appearance in Undertown, but whatever. Yeah, no, Kraab is only in 3 episodes. Bro left an impact for having less than an hour of screen time. That's insane. Zombozo and the Circus Freaks. Now, Thumbskull and Acid Breath were last seen when they were arrested in Omniverse. Zombozo also makes his final appearance in that episode, but he actually escaped the plumbers at the end by launching himself out of a cannon, thus continuing the streak of him being the slipperiest bad guy in Ben 10, especially if you read the comics in which he escapes over and over again. But yeah, apparently Zombozo is supposed to crash land on a Nerd during the Galactic Monsters arc, but in the end he did not show up, with them saying that maybe he's still en route to the Nerd. So in the end, Zombozo most likely escaped capture and now lives on a Nerd.
You can't keep getting away with it!
As for Frightwig, she was also arrested in something Zombozo This Way Comes, but in the future, she's the leader of the Nuevo Circus Freaks. Nuevo meaning new for those unfamiliar. So Frightwig is still active and leading a new circus freak gang, and the last we've heard of her, she was being engaged by Ultimos. In battle, not romantically. Kevin 11. Kevin ends Omniverse as one of Ben's best friends dating his cousin. Kevin also has greater control of his powers at this point, having absorbed the Omnitrix but not lost his sanity. In the future, however, something happened to make Kevin go bad. We know that absorbing large amounts of energy makes Kevin go insane, so for him to handle the Omnitrix and still go insane in the future, I can't even imagine what he absorbed. While it's not confirmed, it has long been my headcanon that this directly ties into the events of Ben 100, where an older Ben has a choice, and depending on what he chooses, he will either become Eon or Ben 10,000. I also speculate if this event either caused or led to the fated battle with Vilgax, and maybe this is what made Ben become super serious when he was 20 years old. These are just theories though. As for what we know happened for sure, Kevin became evil and was locked up in the Null Void. He eventually escaped and impregnated a girl from a Saturn colony, who gave birth to his son Devlin. Kevin was eventually locked up again, and in the Null Void he absorbed a ridiculous amount of DNA and became Kevin 11,000, with the DNA of at least 11,000 aliens. It's confirmed he even has the DNA of some aliens Ben doesn't have. Now, Kevin 11,000 was originally intended to have more DNA than Ben 10,000. If this still holds true, then that means Kevin would have over 1 million pieces of DNA, which is obscene. Kevin is also in full control of his powers at this point and is able to shift back and forth between forms, and even use alien powers in his base form. Anyways, Devlin, who has the ability to turn into Kevin's original amalgam form, becomes friends with Ben's son Ken, and eventually betrays him and frees his father from the Null Void. Kevin proceeds to attack Ben and Ken with his new overwhelming strength, even shrugging off a pounding from way big. But ultimately, Kevin is sent back to the Null Void, and Devlin stays with the Tennyson family. Something to note is that it was eventually established that mana in its purest form is pink, and that Hex's mana was miscolored because his evil and bad emotions were polluting his mana. This is also why Gwen's mana was blue in the original series, because she hadn't mastered it yet. Now, I mention this because Gwendolyn in these episodes has yellow mana, and I know that is simply because this episode aired before that was established, but maybe, in verse, her mana is yellow because she is still shaken up about what happened to Kevin. This would not be the end of him, however, as in the episode End of an Era, which takes place at least 3 years in the future since Ken is referred to as a teen, Kevin once again has his sanity restored and is once again dating Gwen, who now has pink mana. Kevin is now in charge of keeping watch over the Rooters, and it's confirmed Devlin was just not in this episode because he was grounded during the same event that caused Ken to get his Omnitrix taken away. But yeah, in true Kevin fashion, his future was the same as the story we've seen so far. He absorbs a lot of energy, goes crazy, gets a new amalgam form, gets cured, and dates Gwen once again. Still crazy that he spent over 11 years in the Null Void though. The megawatts. By the time of Omniverse, it's established that a group of Nosdenians now voluntarily choose to power Undertown. Rojo. After defusing with the Vilgax robot, she equipped herself with alien tech. And as seen in Ultimate Alien, she made a new gang with her friend Amarillo and her girlfriend Azul, obviously named after the colors yellow and blue. In Omniverse, we do see that she's still up to the same old shenanigans, and she was last seen in the most dangerous game as a female contestant, like most characters that they remembered to send the character sheets in for. After which, she was sent to the Null Void, rescued, and arrested. Fun fact, did you know her real name is Joey? Yeah, Rojo's a reference to her red armor and allegedly an abbreviation of Robot Joey. Weird. Hex. Although he was strong enough to take over the world in time heals and did whatever the hell he did in that Hex video game, after that, he did some self-reflection, beat his depression, and decided becoming a teacher would be a more advantageous route. And as such, he ended up as a teacher at Gwen's own Friedkin University. Also, fun fact, he was what's called Hex Lord in a DVD set. Really makes you wonder what his real name is. Wainwright. Yeah, probably better known as the creep who kidnapped Grey Matter. In the end, after a crazy adventure with Ben and the Forever Knights, Wainwright gives up his alien obsession. Just in time, too, as we'll discuss later when we get to Enoch. Clancy. Clancy was a mutant who was eventually experimented on by Animo. And if he reappeared in Omniverse, he would have looked like the cockroach monster from the movie The Mimic. Presumably, he is still in Plumber custody, though.
It was Vilgax. It was always Vilgax.
Vilgax's last appearance was in Malgax Attacks, in which he was fried while wearing the malware armor. In truth, Vilgax survived and went on to confront Ben later on, leading Ben to mutilate him and put his body in stasis, to make sure he couldn't harm anyone anymore. After this encounter, Ben would become super serious, until the events of the episode Ben 10,000. In that episode, Animo resurrects Vilgax and enhances him with his DNA transmodulator, now with unique powers designed to counter Ben's aliens. Ultimately, Ben 10,000 and Ben team up, and Vilgax is left frozen. Vilgax, however, would survive this encounter, only meeting his true end 200 years into the future. But for now, he's captured, although he technically will outlive them all. Also, he likely has a son, according to the Bandai cards, and eventually a descendant from the year 3000, at least according to the comics, meaning that in the future, the Tennyson line will still be plagued by Vilgax's legacy. Phil. Phil was Max's old partner in the Plumbers who was experimented on and transformed into a Tarantula hybrid. Eventually, Phil joined the Rooters, but was ultimately taken down by Argent. Then, his plumber commission was revoked by the Magistrata, and he was stranded in the Null Void. For the record, this outcome is the same for the other members of the Rooters as well. In the future, Kevin is in charge of taking over Rook's old job, which is keeping the Rooters in line, since it seems they still cause trouble, having likely escaped from the Null Void. The Great One. The Tick and the three aliens who worship it came to Earth where he planned on devouring the energy inside of the Earth, destroying it in the process. This was the episode in which Ben used his cannon bolt to murk this guy, literally getting inside his body, breaking his bones, impaling his heart. They messed this guy up dead. His three worshippers also just leave after this. Slix Vigma. Slix Vigma is the robot who created the gladiator fights in Grudge Match. He was destroyed by Kevin in that episode, but he was rebuilt and showed up as the announcer in No Honor Amongst Bros. However, since the Golden Fist tournament was illegal, he was arrested shortly thereafter, although Chad Smith did help him get his sentence reduced. Vulcanus. Vulcanus is a recurring villain showing up in all 4 main series, and quite frequently at that. Vulcanus' final chronological appearance would be in the episode Ken 10, where Ben 10,000 would defeat him and send him to the Null Void. Zs'skayr. Zs'skayr has had many plots in Ben 10. Ultimately, His final plan to take over the universe with an army of flat hats came to naught as he was suddenly betrayed by Dr. Viktor, who saved Ben. And Ben's atomics created a light orb called the Fusion Cuisine that vaporized Zs'skayr's ectoplasm down to its atomic structure and dispersed his remnant particles, which was radiated out in every direction for thousands of miles, and some were sent into outer space. Like, he actually got obliterated here. And even in the off chance that he ever revives, they left the fusion cuisine there so that he can't come back to the castle. And if we assume he'll respawn where he died, that means they are just straight up spawn killing him. They actually decimated, bro. This is insane. Enoch. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail about Enoch, as I do plan on making a Forever Knights video. The same will go for Driscoll, Sir Connor, Sir Patrick, Winston, Zs'skayr, all the other Forever Knights. Let's just rip the band-aid right here. During the events of the Esoterica War, they all die. Yeah. Akpuk. Akpuk is an alien who the Minds revered as the god of death. He was the guardian of a sword and attacked anyone who went after it. This sword was 5,000 years old though and crumbled to dust when used. So, his job was probably unnecessary for at least a good while. Still, Akpuk was in the temple when it collapsed. So, I'm just gonna assume he died. They killed the god of death. The Mycellium. The Mycellium planned on consuming every living creature on the planet. Ben then used his athlete's foot powder to kill them all. Ben, that's murder. Bro does not care. Charmcaster. After going psycho crazy and capturing Adwecha, Hex, Micheal Morningstar, and Gwen as totems, she herself was eventually defeated and turned into a totem. Now in the possession of Gwen, who was restored. And Gwen says that under these circumstances of Charmcaster being rendered harmless, the two of them can finally become friends, implying that she'll try to redeem Charmcaster by talking to her, on some forced therapy type beat. Something that is likely successful, as in the future Charmcaster apparently marries Hobble, and I doubt that would happen if she was still a villain. The Tentacle Troopers. The Tentacle Troopers were aliens who crash landed in the Bermuda Triangle, and they were responsible for all the planes and ships going missing there, as they were searching for the core they needed to power their ships so they could finally escape Earth. Ben instead decimates the core and kills them all. And these guys are confirmed to be aliens, meaning it is very clear Ben does not have a no-kill rule. Because this wasn't a one-off, he straight up wiped out like hundreds of them. Frank. He isn't a major villain, and he does end up arrested. I only mention him because he appears in the short Hijacked, meaning this random guy was unlucky enough to face Ben twice. Almost as bad as Convict here. He faces Ben and gets arrested. He later tries to take over a prison bus and gets stopped by Ben, and on top of that, he shows up in the same short Frank did, and Ben stops him there too. Sublimino. He was defeated in his debut episode before later joining the -10, where he fails to hypnotize Guy and is trapped within a force field, after which he was arrested. Although there were plans to bring Sublimino back in Omniverse that never came to fruition, so it's very likely he will escape prison at some point to attack Ben once again. Exoskull. Now, Exoskull used to be human, but was turned into a human-rhino hybrid after he joined Animo's interspecies gang, which is a group of criminal animal hybrids. He first appears in the episode Ben 10,000, but is quickly defeated, and he later plays a major role in the Time War, in which him and his girlfriend Subdora go back in time while working for Maltruant. His final appearance is in End of an Era, where he steals the Dwarf Star from Maltruant, and then beats Rook and Kevin 11,000, before he hands the Dwarf Star over to Maltruant and is himself defeated by Ben. And Maltruant, having already gotten everything he needs, abandons both Exoskull and Subdora, leaving them to be locked up. I don't know why these villains keep teaming up. Name one time that they didn't turn on each other. Besides the -10. Mr. Jingles. He was cursed into becoming an elf and spent almost a century kidnapping children and turning them into elves, forcing them to work. He eventually thinks Max is Santa Claus and starts controlling him to make the perfect Christmas. However, Ben finds and turns off the Christmas machine. And after realizing they need to make a perfect Christmas in order to break the curse, the Tennysons help out by having Stinkfly fly across the earth in one night, delivering presents. Which is actually kind of a crazy speed feat if you think about it. This broke the curse and restored a timeline as if the curse never even happened. In this new timeline, Mr. Jingles became the founder of Holiday Village, while Elsgood, who was one of the elves, became a grandfather. Fun fact, Elsgood's grandkids are actually based on Konohamaru, Moegi, and Udon. But, if Konohamaru is here, and Elsgood is his grandfather, does that mean Elsgood is the third Hokage? Regardless, I have so many questions about what happened. First off, how did it take a century for Mr. Jingles to learn the meaning of Christmas? Most children in Christmas movies learn that in about 90 minutes. Next, does Elsgood remember what happened? Because he was trapped in there for like 90 years. I know he said to him it only felt like a couple days, but is he just walking around with 2 lifetimes worth of memories? And finally, is Mr. Jingles evil, or is he just misguided and desperate? Honestly, the one who's really evil is whoever cursed him in the first place, because they are still out there. But yeah, in the end, Mr. Jingles was redeemed. But he is dead. Old age. Presumably. The werewolf. This freak was working for Zs'skayr. He didn't talk for some reason, and he ran around naked. His last seen standing next to the transmitter as it exploded. So I guess he died. In the end, this guy was just a mute nudist who tried to help Zs'skayr take over the world, and it blew up. Yeah. Kenko. Kenko was an evil Sumo Slammers character who fought Ben when he was sucked into the game Sumo Slammers. As for his fate, canonically, in the sequel to Sumo Slammers, Sumo Slammer Hero Generation, which takes place 5 years later, he teams up with Ishiyama. I should mention, he's not a real character though, except for that one time. Kangaroo Commando. Since Kangaroo Commando has more or less the same fate as the rest of the Avengers, I'll talk about them all now. The Avengers was a hero group led by Billy Billions. In the end, they turn evil and end up being chased by the local police. Arrested. Fun fact, Kane is based on Adam West's Batman, and he also changes his name from Kangaroo Commando to Kangaroo Commando. To be more evil, I guess. And if you couldn't tell, he and his brother Abel are based on Cain and Abel. I also confuse this guy with Captain Nemesis, like, all the time. Kinda embarrassing when his whole gimmick is that he just wants attention, and yet I keep forgetting that he exists. Speaking about Captain Nemesis, in Ventures, they state that they had already paid their debt to society, even though Captain Nemesis killed a man only a few months ago. It seems that even in Ben 10, you can buy your way out of the justice system. Finally, Billy Billions, who, in case you didn't know, looks permanently 11 years old, is described that in the future, he's still 11-year-old size, but is looking old and wrinkly. And like, why does he look old and wrinkly at like age 40? This guy's life sucks. The Mummy. The Mummy is a mute mummy that works for Zs'skayr. But at least he has the decency to wear clothes. He gets sent through a portal. Where'd he go? I don't know, but Viktor comes back, so I guess he probably didn't die, meaning he's still out there. Dr. Viktor. Dr. Viktor worked for Zs'skayr before being sent to a portal to who knows where, just like the Mummy. He was later attacked by Ultimate Kevin since he said these hands are rated E for everybody, thrown in the Null Void, and frozen. He later had his body taken over, he got his body back, and once again began working with Zs'skayr, but betrayed him after learning he planned on resurrecting the Vladats, which previously enslaved his people. After this, Viktor decided to be his own boss for a while, said, "I'm gonna do my own thing." Although, only for a while, as he still serves Zs'skayr. Like, Bro, why is he so loyal? Zs'skayr is so abusive towards him, like he actually has him whipped for real. The Lenopans, more specifically the Mans, they try to stop their daughter Camille's wedding to Max's nephew Joel. They get arrested by the plumbers off screen. Loki, people like this are the reason why Lenopans have such a bad name. Side note, but did you notice that Lucy used to have whisker-like marks in the classic series? They swapped that out for freckles in Omniverse, but she was low-key rocking the Boruto look for a minute there. The Road Crew. They steal the rust bucket and try to use it to destroy a highway. Although they were defeated, they still terrorize the roads to this day. Damn, they're really still out there, huh? Why am I surprised? I wrote this. Mr. Beck. Mr. Beck was a gangster who wanted money from Gator Boy and Porcupine. He even tried sawing their mother in half. Loki, this guy might be one of the most evil characters in Ben 10. I mean, we've seen a lot of nonsense, but the straight up vivisection is quite a rare one. But after getting beat by Ditto, Mr. Beck was arrested. Interestingly, Gator Boy and Porcupine are human mutants, with their being described as having modes, meaning they might be able to have a regular human appearance if they chose. Sploot. Sploot is an out-of-control science experiment from the Omnitrix City University. He first appeared in Ken 10, where he fought Ben 10,000 and was sent to the Null Void. Mot Snikrep. Mot Snikrep was one of the concept designs for Upchuck. He ends up being recycled as an escaped criminal from Incarcicon. And like the whole point of Incarcicon is that you can't escape, and yet that's all we see them do. They really need to step up their security. Mot Snikrep fights Ben 10,000, is defeated, and sent to the Null Void. You think the people in the Null Void bump into each other? Like, is Mot Snikrep, like, gonna bump into Alpha? At this point, the only member of the -10 I haven't mentioned yet is the Red Knight. He's a robot, and he reappears in Omniverse, but is destroyed. However, the Forever King grabs his body and escapes. So, even though he's destroyed, he's technically still out there, because they can rebuild him, presumably. I mean, they rebuilt him last time. The Piscus Valoon Thug. He's part of Siphon's gang and shows up in 6 episodes. Mainly in the background, but I mention him because he has a scar on his right eye, just like the Piscus Valoon Thug from Incarcicon. I think it's the same guy. And then, in the reboots, this guy is in the Null Void. He's actually a recurring villain across both iterations of Ben 10. He escaped Incarcicon and later joined Siphon's gang. And currently, he's still out there. Eon. Another character who deserves a full video, low-key. But the last time we saw Eon, he is betrayed by Maltruant and sent back to his timeline. Meaning he's still out there. Unless he's trapped there permanently, in which case, yo, that sucks for him. Also, why the hell did Eon team up with Maltruant? He literally teamed up with Vilgax shortly before this, and that did not pan out for him. Bro's moving like Albedo. Nah. I'm sure it'll work this time. The Retaliator. The Retaliator was hunting the evil Takustar to avenge Azmith. The Retaliator was eventually revealed to be Azmith's father in Mechamorph armor. The reason he looks so young is because he transferred his mind from his failing body into a clone body. And it turned out that the evil Takustar was Azmith, who had been transformed due to the Omnitrix malfunctioning. Azmith's father, who was never named by the way, is never seen again after this. But I imagine he's probably fine. And we know Azmith is still around in the future, so they're probably just chilling. The DNA-aliens. The Xenocytes were taking over people's bodies and turning them into DNA-aliens. By the events of War of the Worlds, they managed to free these people. Well, the ones they didn't kill, at least. I'm looking at you, Kevin. The Hybrid. They were attacking due to believing their race superior. But they were sterile due to interbreeding and thought if we're going out, all these other lower life forms are going down with us. Ben ends up using the Omnitrix to bring genetic diversity back into their species, making them fertile again, thus ending their genocidal war. So, in the end, they are now peaceful. Interestingly, the Bailiff, who is a hybrid we see in Omniverse, is virtually unchanged from the original hybrid design. and it was revealed only 99.99% of the hybrid were cured due to the range of the jump gates. So, I guess this guy was just one of the unlucky few. Kinda weird knowing he's sterile. Micheal Morningstar, Charmcaster's ex, who's also jacked, by the way, depending on how much he absorbed, as he was able to smack around hybrid. And in case you forgot, on the high end, the hybrid were low-key stronger than original series Vilgax. Anyways, Darkstar was held captive by Charmcaster for months before escaping and being arrested. Also, during Ultimate Alien, he apparently slept with Charmcaster, which raises the question, what is his age? I mean, he refers to Ben as being children, implying he's older, but he is still going to prep school. If we say he was 17 in Alien Force and 18 in Ultimate Alien, this is fine. But in a storybook, it says he's around Ben's age. All I'm saying is, if he ends up being 16 in Alien Force instead of 17, it will cement the Charmcaster pedo allegations. After all, she already did kiss a 17-year-old, and in case you forgot, she's in her 20s. They actually reversed this in the reboot, with Micheal Morningstar being a predator, with Charmcaster being presumably about the same age she was in Classic Series, so about 15, with him being canonically hundreds of years old.
Their adoration has sustained me for centuries!
You know this guy was on the island. Lock him up. The next villain we have, I guess, is Ship. In the future, Ship is still with Julie. A fun fact is Derek J. White believed Ship was not part of Bazel, but rather a mascot absorbed by him and deabsorbed later. Meaning, they're just like mascot galvanic mechamorphs running around who act like dogs. Also, does galvanic mechamorph imply the existence of non-galvanic mechamorphs? Where are all these mechamorphs?
Upgrades, people, upgrades!
Verdona. She's Ben's all-powerful Anodite grandmother. She's presumably just chilling. Also, she was supposed to show up in Omniverse, and this is what her design would have looked like. JT and Cash. These guys are former bullies, but they eventually settled down after Ben helped Cash regain himself during the incident with the Tekadon Gauntlet.
People change, Levin. You did.
Seems under different circumstances, Ben would have been good friends with these two, as when he was a kid he used to be best friends with JT, and No Watch Ben is friends with Cash. Manny and Helen. Not really a villain, only misguided. They become plumbers, and at one point Manny loses his hand. They're also dating, which raises the question of why there aren't any mixed species kids running around. Unless it's not physically possible, I mean. But that would be pretty weird, seeing as how the plumber kids were introduced as alien hybrids. I mean, I guess Frank and Carl are mixed species since their mother's an Anodite? Are Frank and Carl the only mixed species people we see in this show? Hugo. After the Paradox experiment went wrong, Hugo was turned into the trans-dimensional creature that ages everything it touches. Professor Paradox and the team changed time so this never happened, and the older Hugo then says he lived a good life, and Paradox takes him on a time-traveling adventure. Little concerning we never see him again though, but maybe it's just, timelines are weird with Paradox. Why does Hugo have memories of the timeline that was erased? Is he also a Paradox now? Did Paradox send him to the depository? Emperor Milius, the leader of the incursions. He was overthrown by his daughter and is currently in plumber custody. I guess they're treating him better than his wife, who is currently in stasis jail. Albedo. Albedo had his Ultimatrix deactivated and was trapped in the body of a 10-year-old Ben, in addition to getting sentenced to cleaning up the Galvan cities for the next 30,000 solar cycles. In spite of that, Derek J. Wyatt did confirm Albedo 10K in the future. Although that would mean he's like 6 years younger physically than Ben 10,000. Also, does that mean he will regain his ability to transform? I guess he could just build another Ultimatrix, right? As long as he doesn't run afoul of Azimuth, bro shut him down instantly. In the end, Albedo is arrested. Currently, but in the future, he's still out there. The next episode, I guess the villain is the Miracle of Birth. The baby chills, however, are confirmed to meet Ben's son Kenny in the future at some point. So I guess Ben's not a deadbeat dad to his 14 Necrophrygian children. although he did forget they existed that one time. Ironically, after he previously remembered they did exist. Whatever, he remembers them at some point, that's the important part. Unless, of course, you want to believe that he never forgot that when he said he doesn't have a son, that was confirmation that all the baby chills are girls. Simeon. This no-good slimeball will con anyone. He even sold out the entire Earth one time. In the end, he betrays Argent and gets arrested by the plumbers. Honestly, he should have been killed by the hybrid during that scene that went unreasonably hard, and him surviving makes no sense. But whatever, I guess it's just Arachnochimp upscale. Dr. Joseph Chadwick and Sir Morton. These two debut in Pet Project, an episode where they try to capture a ship, and Chadwick is presumed dead after that episode. Chadwick, however, would be revealed to be alive in Omniverse. In fact, he was one of the only knights left alive after the Esoterical War. As a result, he was now the new Forever King. He first tried to wipe out all alien life with a hybrid pulse generator, then turned himself into a gorilla monster to try to claim Excalibur. Also, at some point, he reportedly approached Animo about ruling the world for him. And why? Well, poor decision making aside, in his final appearance, Chadwick escapes capture. Also, his alien gorilla hybrid is confirmed to only be temporary, so he will be human once again. For the record, Sir Morton is with Chadwick in all of his appearances, and also escapes. An interesting fact about Morton is that he loses a tooth between Alien Force and Omniverse, so I guess the Esoterica just clocked him or something. Tiny. Tiny is literally just a baby. They spend the entire episode beefing with a literal baby. This is literally the atomic bomb versus coughing baby meme, but the baby's whooping feet. Upon realizing this is only a infant, they reunite her with her parents. Viktor Validus. He was a plumber who got infected by the microchips. He later tried stealing more microchips to experiment on them and find a weakness to try to cure himself, but was caught stealing equipment and kicked out of the plumbers. The Hive Queen eventually took over his body and started enacting her plan to take over the world. The Hive Queen is eventually defeated with the help of the team and Victor's daughter Elena. And now freed, he's reunited with his daughter, and Max apologizes to him for not believing him all those years ago. Happy ending, right? Wrong! As it turns out, the queen was a decoy. The real queen was his daughter Elena. She set up the entire plot of Alien Swarm so Ben would think the matter resolved and not look further into it. Victor, on the other hand, would die shortly after this while experimenting with the microchips. Which raises the question, did Elena kill him? Is the story of Viktor Validus the story of a man who's infected by alien microchips, abandoned by his friends in his time of need, had his body taken over completely, was freed in an elaborate plot to throw suspicion off the trail of the real perpetrator, his own daughter, who may have proceeded to kill him? Completely wild. Loki feel bad for him. Dead. The Vreedles. I'm gonna go through all of them at the same time. Ma, Octagon, Rhomboid, and Pretty Boy all go free, while Perry, Siles, and Pa end up accidentally blowing themselves up. Though that doesn't really matter since they'll just bring them back with clones. So in the end, the Vreedles are still out there, even if half of them are currently dead. The Red and Blue leaders. They have been in a race war for quite a while over what color their idol Zavin was. But the two factions are able to unite in their mutual hatred of Ben 10, forming the Purple Army. And for the record, it's just purple clothes. They did not change their skin color. This, however, did not create peace, in case you were wondering, because while it's true they aren't killing each other anymore, war preparation has ramped up, and now the people are instead being worked to death. Many have lost their homes and are now working double time at the factory. Such is the fate of this world, I guess. Mr. Coleman. Mr. Coleman was the mayor who kidnapped Dekka and forced him to poop gold. But this led to Dekka going on a rampage. Mayor Coleman was later arrested for his crimes. Sunder. Sunder is arguably the best bounty hunter in Ben 10, best known as being the main villain of one of the most memorable episodes of Ben 10, Single-Handed. From there, he was consistently a top-tier threat, until Omniverse, in which he was just kind of a jobber that they didn't pay much attention to. He had a little rough, to be honest. He was one of the people who was defeated and banned from Undertown, and his final appearance was in Universe vs. Tennyson, in which Chad Smith freed him from prison. Meaning Sunder's at large and likely still acting as a bounty hunter. Mr. Smoothie. When he was brought to life, he was drinking to death by Upchuck. He's also a boss battle in Vilgax attacks, and Ben defeated him there, also presumably killing him. And apparently absorbing his DNA in that game. So his ultimate fate was killed twice. And now he's done for good, because as James Bond taught us, you only live twice. So after spending a whole episode fighting a baby, they decide to double down and spend an entire episode fighting a children's toy. This is just getting embarrassing. Sangfroid. This guy's not a major villain, but I had to mention him. After Raph killed his men, they threw him into a black hole. This is insanity. You know, time extends when you fall into a black hole. So this guy might have felt his very atoms being ripped apart for centuries. Jarrett. Jarrett is a baby-eating despot king with hellfire powers. I mean, besides eating babies, the worst thing he ever did was hire bounty hunters to beat Ben up in a comic book. So, he's still out there, ruling an entire planet in fact. Ragnarok. Originally, Ragnarok was the man who killed Kevin's father, Devin. Of course, Devin got retconned, and retconned, and retconned. He went from being an Osmosian plumber from Osmos 5 who loved his family and died, to Osmos 5 not existing, and Osmosians not being an alien species, to him never being Max's partner, or a plumber, to him arguably never existing. Like, we are one step off from Kevin just being born without a father, on some Anakin type beat. In reality, Kevin's father was a drunk, abusive dad, but he did still die. And he was arguably named Lucas. Whatever. The point here is Ragnarok did not kill Kevin's dad. Presumably. In reality, Ragnarok was working for the Rooters. At the end of his debut episode, Kevin leaves Ragnarok to die, and he gets sucked into space, all in order to avenge the father Ragnarok never killed. Honestly, I don't know if he also had fake memories implanted in him or what, because if he knew, and he just committed to the bit so hard, he died for it, that's insane. Honestly, the question here is, did Kevin kill an innocent man? I mean, yes, Ragnarok did try to drain the sun, but with most of his backstory in doubt, is attempting a serious crime really worth death? Especially if he was already defeated and surrendering? I don't know. But as for his fate, Ragnarok was ultimately left dead. The Andromeda 5. They try to escape from Aggregor, fail, and get absorbed by him. While it did initially seem they were killed, they were later restored to life after the Aggregor arc. Seemingly because they were completely absorbed and thus becoming energy and still being it's very obvious this was just to get past the censors. Like, you can kill them if they only come back to life. Okay. Will Harang. Will Harang is a corrupt reporter who hates aliens and Ben 10. Ben eventually genetically mutates him into being an alien, and he is stuck that way permanently. Genetically mutilating a man to prove a point is kinda cruel and unusual punishment, I'm not gonna lie. On the bright side for Will here, he still gets good ratings though. Unfortunately for him, by the events of End of an Era, Jimmy Jones is a successful reporter, presumably taking his own job, and he's now stuck as Jimmy's cameraman. Aggregor. I've mentioned this before, but Aggregor was supposed to show up in Omniverse, where it would be revealed that he was a failed Rooters experiment to duplicate Kevin's powers. And Aggregor was supposed to show up to ask Kevin for help because his genetic material was breaking down. but it would be too late, as his entire genetic structure would collapse, turning him into a puddle of ooze. Dead. The fun fact here is that since Aggregor was created in the lab, he's actually only about 5 years old. Loki walking around like Cell.
I'm 6. Wow.
That's not how I do business.
Hammer, Surgeon, and Buzz. They take the job to open Pandor's suit, and then later take the job to kidnap Kevin before Pandor betrays them. They reappear in a comic where they kidnap Julie to try to take the Ultimatrix, but Ben beats them. It calls a SWAT team to arrest them, meaning in the end, if you count the comics, they were arrested. Morg. Morg replaced the guards at Incarsicon with robots, so he could mine the blue dust and sell the drugs and become a kingpin. He also killed Quarrel, who was Kevin's mentor. When Ben and Gwen found out about this, they beat him up and handed him over to the plumbers to be tried for his many crimes, which, for the record, include prison slave labor, drug trafficking, murder, concealment, torture, attempted mass murder, and negligence in his duties as a warden. Low-key, it's fun to just look up these guys' crimes sometimes. Adwacha. Adwacha used the Alpha Rune, which is apparently the source of all magic. I know, pretty powerful, right? But the rune's immense power corrupted him, and he began to believe that all things are stealing mana from him. He ended up conquering Ledger Domain and killing Spellbinder, aka Charmcaster's father and Hex's brother. Adwacha would later be held hostage for months, while Charmcaster turned him into a totem. Once freed from Charmcaster's bag, he just teleports away, meaning he is canonically still out there. Argent. Argent came into the possession of some Tekadon robots and used them to protect Undertown, to his profit of course. This ended up making him beloved in the town, and he ended up smooth-talking his way all the way into becoming President of Earth. Yeah. Low-key, I can see the comments now. Still a better candidate than the last election. Like, yeah, low-key, I mean, I guess he was born after color TV. Prisoner 775. Prisoner 775 was part of a revolution on his home planet that was lost. He was exiled from his homeworld by an oppressive dictator and crash-landed on Earth. While here, he ended up imprisoned in the secret Area 51 facility, held on false suspicion of being a terrorist. Since he was unable to get back home, without him, his mates and his children were executed. Eventually, he escapes and tries to get revenge against Colonel Rosum, but is defeated and taken by the plumbers for interrogation. He is presumably free now, and while Ben told them to seek justice instead of revenge, there was no justice to be found. Colonel Rosum, in spite of illegally detaining innocent aliens for over 50 years, ends up facing no punishment. He's still out there and still in power. An infuriating and all too realistic conclusion to Rosum's monstrous acts. The Plant Alien. Yeah, Jimmy threw some peanuts in his mouth and it blew up. Fun fact, Ben is also allergic to peanuts, so if Jimmy threw peanuts in his mouth, the same thing would happen. Strabismus. Strabismus is the leader of the Churls. They attack Bazel for stealing a sacred artifact, but back down after he returns it. This guy wasn't even a bad guy. Loki Bazel is the bad guy. King Zarian. The king of Zarkovia is a heartless tyrant. The Prince Gyula planned on using Viktor to destroy the rebels, as he hates the rebels due to murdering his mother when he was a boy. But it would have later been revealed that Zarian killed her himself for helping the rebels. Meaning the prince has spent all this time trying to avenge his mother by attacking the very cause that she fought for. Zarian eventually had his mind transferred into Viktor's body, and planned on using his new form to crush the rebels, and once even tried to murder his own son, but Ben beat him and encased him in molten metal. Zs'skayr eventually found him, entered Viktor's body, and overpowered him, restoring Viktor's mind. And though it may seem that Zarian died, according to Derek J. Wyatt, part of Zarian's consciousness are trapped in Viktor's brain. So in the end, his consciousness is trapped inside a body he cannot control. That's actually horrifying. Sunny. She was banished to Earth for falling in with a bad crowd, aka dating Antonio. While on Earth, she copied Gwen's look, tried to steal her boyfriend even though she was dating Antonio at the time, and then after fighting some Dimension 12 robots, Antonio and her almost nuked Bellwood when they started attacking a bomb thinking it was another robot. She was then taken off planet by Verdona. In Omniverse, we find out Sunny is still biting Gwen's style, raising the question of whether this is coincidental or if Sunny just keeps tabs on Gwen with the sole intention being to copy her. Regardless, she's still off planet with Verdona. As for Antonio, Sunny and him broke up and deserved. She belongs to the streets. She tried to cheat on him the second he was out of sight. Also, I'm not sure how bad of a guy Antonio really is, because he ends up as Esther's boyfriend. Elena. Although Elena was absolutely psycho crazy as the Nanite Queen, by Omniverse, she was no longer a villain, as she was returned back to normal after having the nanites separated from her off-screen. Something that, if the graphic novels are to believe, had to have happened at some point during Omniverse. As for the nanites, they will eventually go on to evolve into their own species of nanomechs. Kolar. Kolar escaped from the Null Void and spent an entire episode trying to kill Magister Holka to get his revenge for Holka arresting him. Interestingly, Kolar's a blue Tetraman. This is exceedingly rare since every other Tetraman we see is red. But it shows that aliens of the same species can be different colors, such as Diamond Head species for instance. Or ours. Yeah, I guess I should have thought of our species first. Either that, or Kolar is a mutant or something. Strangely, Derek J. Wyatt claimed Kolar might be a different species entirely that mutated to have extra arms, but no.
I recognize the council has made a decision, but given that it's a stupid-ass decision, I've elected to ignore it.
Conduit Edwards. Conduit Edwards is the leader of the Esoterica, the cult that worshipped the Dagon. During the actual coming of the Dagon, Edwards tries to assassinate Sir George. His squire Winston took the blow and died in his place, and in return George stabbed Edward through the stomach, killing him. Serpent. In his final appearance, Serpent managed to evade capture and escape. He did, however, return in the Omniverse comics made by IDW. For the full story on that, you can check out the video I made here, but shameless plug aside, in the end, Serpent was defeated and arrested. The Ultimates. Due to a glitch in the Ultimatrix, the Ultimates became sentient and were being held hostage in the Watch. After being freed, Asimov then took the Ultimates to his lab so they can live free. Well, most of them anyway. You see, it's been confirmed that Kyber has an Ultimate Humongosaur helmet as a trophy. Meaning, off-screen, Kyber killed Ultimate Humongosaur. The Trash Monster. Threw it into the sun. I keep forgetting Ben can just do that. He can literally just throw people into the sun. And yet, he's struggling with Animo. Inspector 13. He's a Tekadon weapon master going back 13 generations. After his failure to capture the Ultimatrix, he was no longer an inspector of the Tekadon Empire. He's now an independent businessman and deals with illegal weapon trading. In his final appearance, he is seen selling Liam weapons. And he isn't arrested or anything, so I guess he's still out there. The Dagon. The Dagon was an extra-dimensional alien from a being of Old Ones. The very enemy the Forever Knights were created to combat, who's also one of the biggest threats in Ben 10. But despite all his hype, the Dagon was betrayed by his servant Vilgax and had his entire essence absorbed, using the same machine Vilgax used to take Ultimos' powers. When Ben used Ascalon to defeat Vilgax, Dagon was then absorbed into Ascalon. I don't know if he's dead or merely sealed, but those are fundamentally the same, so dead. Alpha. Alpha was the counterpart to the Omega-1 nanite and the main villain of Heroes United. During the special, Alpha does cool things like copy the Ultimatrix, but they defeat him by compacting his nanites into an orb, and throwing that orb into the Null Void. But at the end of that special, we see his prison begin cracking, foreshadowing a return that will never happen. So, in the end, I guess he's just still in the Null Void. Which is basically prison. So, I guess he's arrested? Now, I'm gonna blame Chadsmith for this, but in Omniverse, just about every villain walks free. At the very least, the low-level ones. Liam, Buglight, Sweet Eel, Sparklefunk, these guys all go free. Gorvin, who's the villain of a video game before showing up in Omniverse, also goes free. I also have an action figure of this guy. Why did they make an action figure of this guy? Bubblehead was arrested, but then we literally see Chadsmith get him off. Pause! The same thing happens with Trombipulor. And Tummyhead is absolutely a bizarre case, because not only does he go free, but he somehow gets invited to Max's retirement party. Fistina, interestingly, is arrested and redeemed, as she is currently in prison, but after she serves her time, they said she can apply to the Plumber's Academy, so she will presumably become a plumber in the future. Siphon, on the other hand, gets the Kraab treatment. It is merely banned from Undertown. Kyber. Kyber was arrested, but he was also kinda messed up, since in his final appearance he used Zs'skayr to access the Nemetrix, but when Zs'skayr abandoned him, Kyber was turned into the Tyrannopede. And while he was separated from the Nemetrix in time to not have major side effects, he did refer to the Nemetrix as quinoa, so he was likely affected to some degree. While we're on the topic of Kyber, did you know that he has Cybertronian trophies on his ship? Something that should be impossible since Transformers isn't canon, but according to Vector Prime, which is this Transformers Q&A thing, Kyber was able to interact with the Transformers universe to get his Cybertronian trophies. And I guess this can tie into Decimus Prime, which is Ben's DNA of a Cybertronian, with them saying that unless there's an explanation for how the two universes can interact, since they're not part of the same multiverse, then Decimus Prime wouldn't be canon. But Vector Prime literally gives an explanation as to how the two universes interact, so I'll leave it up to you whether or not you would accept Decimus Prime as being one of Ben 10,000's aliens because of that. Cork. Quark was defeated in his debut episode, but he can be seen at the auction later, meaning he did escape. Now, Quark is the predator of the Piscis Volon, although he's yet to eat one. I guess he's just really bad as a predator. He just kinda sucks at his job. Although, fun fact, he is not from Piscis. Corvo. Corvo was arrested. Professor Hoakstar. Professor Hoakstar is kind of a con man, but he ends up creating his universe-hopping Mr. Smoothie. And even though he's still running schemes on the side, he is never going to be arrested by Ben due to running one of his favorite smoothie shops. Solid Plug. Solid Plug was originally a design for Ultimate Wild Mutt. Isn't that crazy? Also, his body is completely made of rubber. How, you might be asking?
Yo ho ho, he took a bite of gum gum.
In his final appearance, Solid Plug is arrested. Interestingly, he has 10 appearances. He actually has as many appearances as Hex. Seebic, aka Esther's dad. He was the leader of the Kraho who tried to bring magma out of the Earth's crust to create a new home for the Kraho. After he was defeated, Esther took over leadership. He later went rogue and tried to steal the Dwarf Star, but he is still out there, just no longer in power of the Kraho. I guess Esther wasn't going to let them arrest her dad. She's not a Taya after all. Pax. Pax is obviously a PETA parody. While Pax is not really a villain, he did unleash the Screechit. And in his last appearance, he is seen transporting the Graggleflint to a planet where it can roam free. Fun fact, he apparently has a girlfriend named Petunia. She was supposed to be in the show, but honestly, I'm just glad this guy didn't show up more. He was hella annoying. Malware. His corpse was stolen and used as armor, which is kinda messed up. Malware's remains were seen oozing out of Vilgax's petrified body. Does this mean Malware is still alive? Unknown, but we do know Vilgax was still alive. As it stands, however, with there never being a follow-up to this, the likeliest answer here is just that Malware is in fact just dead.
Poltroon?
Poltroon. Poltroon arranged a peace conference where he tried to kill Vex, Caitiff, and Malice in a coup to take over the planet, after which he planned on destroying the Apoplexians. He also hired the Hulks to attack Gravatak, but in the end, he was defeated by Ben and got infected by the very Hulks he hired. By the events of End of an Era, however, he is free, and it seems that he is reconciled with Vex, Caitiff, and Malice. They really forgave him after that, huh? Politicians, am I right? Fishstrick is arrested in his last appearance. And I'm not saying they should free my boy, but maybe apply some justice equally. I mean, why is my guy locked up with Siphon's roaming free? Psychobos. Psychobos is trapped in Mad Ben's dimension. Forever. And I use the term loosely. Luma and Atea. After spending most of Omniverse trying to get Ben's hand in marriage, they decide they don't need trophy husbands to be good rulers, and they go back to their respective armies, with Luma just going back to being the princess, and Atea becoming the empress of the Incursion fleet. Interestingly, Incursions age differently, with Atea notably only being 11 years old in Omniverse. And it's confirmed that by the time of Ben 10,000, she will look virtually the same. 7-7 and 8-8. They are also banned from Undertown along with their brother 6-6. I don't know if their numbering means anything. Is 8-8 the oldest? Are there 4 more siblings we don't know about? And if that's true, were their parents always planning on having 8 kids? Their naming scheme raises a lot of questions. Okay, so apparently 6-6's name comes from the caliber of the pistols he carries, but is this a nickname? Was he named after he got the guns? Is this a rite of passage like Rookben? Does 2-2, an actual baby, have twin weapons? Is the baby packing heat? Munya. Munya's actually a very famous recurring villain from the Secret Saturdays. His last chronological appearance is in the episode TGIS, in which he's defeated by Fiskerton. And I imagine they arrest him, but to be fair, they beat him in Secret Saturdays, and he showed up as a free man in TGIS, so he might actually just be out there.
Greetings and bienvenue, faithful Weird World Watchers. I am the incomparable VV Argust.
He is the main villain of the Secret Saturdays. And even though he dies in the series finale, he does return in the episode TGIS, after having his body modified by Dr. Animo. But Ben does use feedback to drain his life force, and Argos loses control of his body and is left in a vegetative state. I don't know if he's in a coma, or if he's conscious and trapped in his own body, like a hollow shell for the rest of time. I don't know if he can even die. I mean, he has no life essence after all, and he's getting arrested on top of that. Kind of a gruesome fate for the guy, but I guess it's better than blowing up. I can't believe Ben is the guy who defeated the main villain of Secret Saturdays. Otto. Otto started off as a faulty AI unit for a ventilator, before becoming the villain we all see today. In fact, he's actually the criminal boss in charge of the violent offenders, being recurring minor villains who showed up before Otto was introduced. So, with him being their leader, does that mean he was the one ordering the crimes they committed in those appearances? The violent offenders actually end up showing more often than Otto, but they end up getting arrested by the Avengers in their last appearance. Fun fact, originally he was going to be called Autobot when he transforms. Yeah, the reference was obvious enough that legal stopped it. Anyways, after the mech battle, they left him impaled on a car antenna. Crujo and Cthulhu. They were working for Zs'skayr but go free after he is defeated. Also, Cthulhu is the leader of a Dagon worshipping cult, which is why he's wearing esoterica clothes and has tentacles at his hideout. Collectimus. Collectimus either comes from the universe before the Prime timeline, or from the AFA Continuum. I have no clue what the AFA Continuum is, so be sure to let me know if you do. He tried to collect the Earth, and he also doesn't age, and he is last seen in End of an Era. Lord Transol. The Flat Hats were once the predators of the Transients, and used them as slaves and beasts of burden. The Flat Hats were wiped out by the other inert aliens rising up against them, with the Transients using the energy of captured Pyronites to incinerate and kill them. There's a lot to take in with that sentence. First off, they burnt them to death, and second off, they used slave labor to do it. Well, Lord Transil ended up being resurrected by Zs'skayr, but was taken down by Atomics, who burnt him with his fusion cuisine. And then Viktor imprisoned him in a coffin orbiting the sun, meaning he is arrested and being tortured for the rest of his life. Imagine coming back from the dead just to be tortured for eternity. Like, just kill him at that point. Yero was beaten by Shock Squatch in a classic transformation versus the same alien species battle. And as a result, she was arrested. Although she was a contestant in the most dangerous game. Same deal with Sumungasaur, but Sumungasaur was stopped by Argentrix security. I doubt she was arrested though, meaning she's still out there. An interesting thing about Sumungasaur is that she was specifically created to be a member of the -10 if it was ever an Omniverse, with this version of the -10 being evil versions of Ben's aliens. Bad Ben, Benzaro, and Nega Ben all get sent back to their dimension, but they're technically still out there. Mad Ben, on the other hand, not only gets sent back to his dimension, but gets overthrown and arrested. But apparently, Mad Pakmar is still trying to break him out. Now, Mad Pakmar's a homie for real. Nancy-chan. Nyan is the cat sound in Japanese, so they just turned Nyan into Nyancy, playing on Nancy, and then put Chan at the end. And Chan is a Japanese suffix. Oh my god, Nancy-chan is literally a cat girl. She has the power to control cats. She's also not a mutant, interestingly. She apparently got her powers in the exact same way as Catwoman from Batman Returns. So, I imagine falling off a building and being found by several cats. And she was last seen in the episode Most Dangerous Game as a female contestant, after which she was arrested. Benevolon. According to himself, his goals are to bring peace, and for this he uses a robot named Blurt to destroy worlds. I guess he's got a different idea of peace than me. Then again, if there's no life, things will be pretty peaceful. He attacked Area 51 twice with the robot named Blurt. That is an acronym. I'm not going to look up what it stands for though. The first time the robot was buried, the second time it was destroyed. And Benevolon was ultimately arrested. Kundo. Kundo is Rook's former teacher who hates technology, and attacked Rook because he thought him joining the plumbers was a disgrace, as this guy's obsessed with tradition. He gets caught in Blastonium, but has his life saved by being turned into a cyborg. Ironic. He's revolted by this and now hates the plumbers as a whole, attacking the plumber base and infecting it with a virus that will cause it to self-destruct, as well as transmitting this virus to every plumber installation in the universe. Rook ultimately beats him and they stop the explosions. And this guy was locked up and sent to a prison planet that actually doubles as a mental institution. Yeah, I guess they sent him to basically Ben 10 Arkham Asylum. Charles Zenith. Charles Zenith is a member of a species that feeds on drama, and he chose Ben as the player for an episode of his show. In the end, Charles was eventually incapacitated by pesky dust and trapped in a never-ending nightmare of boredom, and subsequently arrested. Kind of a cruel fate, not gonna lie, especially since he feeds on drama. Are they literally starving him? They got him trapped in an infinite torture loop that's going to starve him to death. Maltruant, the final villain of the series responsible for the Time War, and voiced by the one and only Mark Hamill. His plan was to go back in time and create the universe in his image, and was ultimately defeated when Ben hit him with the Big Bang Kamehameha. After being defeated, he had his components scattered across time and space by Professor Paradox, thus enclosing him in a never-ending time loop of being defeated, rebuilding himself, and being defeated again, without ever knowing that he's in an infinite time loop. The Time Warp being a time loop is also probably the explanation as to why the time travel didn't change Ben's future. And with that, we have officially covered every antagonist in the show. Just to recap, of the 178 antagonists that I covered, 1 was literally a children's toy, 24 was not really a villain, with 5 of those being the Andromeda aliens and 5 of those being the Ultimates. 13 of them were redeemed, 2 of them had an unknown fate, aka 66 and Tetrax, as we don't know who won their duel. 46 of them are still out there, 4 of them was banned from Undertown, 1 was sent to a mental asylum, 39 were arrested, Vilgax was arrested but previously mutilated, 4 were sent back to their home dimensions, 1 was exiled to another dimension, 4 are currently in the Null Void, 2 are imprisoned within their own bodies, 2 are being tortured forever, 30 were killed, with 11 of those being Forever Knights and 3 of them being Vreedles, 1 was not a villain but was killed anyways, Mr. Smoothie was killed twice, and Maltruant is in an infinite death loop. My takeaway from this is that punishment was not equal in Ben 10. Half of the people went free, and the other half are suffering brutal fates. But with this, that's all I got for you today, folks. Be sure to smash that subscribe button, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.